Ember's creators describe the game as being an homage to classic role-playing games, and that's true to a certain degree. However, I think the focus was a bit too much on making an homage, and this stops Ember from being something beyond that or besides that. What Ember is an amalgam of various features and game mechanics from other games that have been very skillfully stitched together around the classic prophesized savior narrative. But is Ember more than the sum of its parts? From a visual standpoint, the game looks great. The environments are varied and colorful, not to mention that the fact that they're dynamic and lived in, meaning that you'll encounter different creatures on each pass through. The background sounds will also change depending on the type of geography you're going through, as well as whether it's day or night. The world map is quite large, and initial transportation between major locations has to be done on foot, with teleportation becoming available once you've reached certain places. This is when you can choose to either take the well-beaten road and avoid wild animal encounters, but at the risk of meeting thieves and brigands, or you can travel through the forests and fight a menagerie of wild animals whose carcasses will result in rather useful crafting materials. Similarly, taking the more scenic route will result in gathering other crafting materials such as plants or finding various mineral veins to mine. Ember features a rather extensive crafting system, allowing you to create everything from making bread to making clothes, armor, potions and magic items. It is very reminiscent of the crafting system in Divinity Original Sin, and much like it happened with the Enhanced Edition in that case, I also expect Ember's crafting system to be overhauled and fluidized in about a year's time. I don't think the current inventory system works very well to help you manage your items properly, so it's not very conducive to crafting because it's a bit difficult to keep track of what you have in your inventory. I think both the inventory and the recipe management system need to be slightly redesigned in order for them to work better together and hence make crafting easier. Combat is the paused real-time kind of combat, my second least favorite type of combat in an RPG after real-time. But this is definitely a very personal and subjective sort of thing. I just prefer turn-based, always have, always will. I won't turn away an RPG just because it doesn't have turn-based combat. After all, I am a huge fan of the Diablo and Torchlight series, but lately I prefer my combat to be turn-based. Coincidentally, this is one thing I disliked about Pillars of Eternity as well, and holy hell, would have turn-based combat helped with the clusterfucks of combat encounters in that game. In Ember, thankfully, the clusterfucks are considerably smaller scale, so post-real-time combat is more manageable. One cool thing about fighting in Ember is the special abilities that your characters can use. The interesting part comes from the fact that these are not class specific, they are item specific abilities. So basically, if an ability is on an item which a character can wield or wear, then that character can now use that special ability. The degree of efficiency with which said character uses any ability will however be influenced by their stats in the relevant domain. This means that a magic user can cast a physical damage ability, but it won't be nearly as efficient as it would have been when cast by a fighter character, and this works vice versa as well. Also, your characters can have more than 3 special abilities on each of them at any one time, which leads to some interesting choices when it comes to deciding which items to use on which character. Will you go for the boost in damage and stats but take the somewhat lame ability, or will you go for the super useful ability and lower stats? Now, in terms of story, the game did not manage to capture my interest despite me investing 10 hours of playtime. It's safe to say that I gave it sufficient time to grow on me. As far as I'm concerned, 10 hours should be more than enough for that to happen, and Ember just didn't manage to do it. It might just be that everything that I saw in the game was a pretty cookie cutter story, and I simply couldn't be made to care neither about the protagonist or the world. As far as the world building is concerned though, there's quite a few books that you'll stumble upon which you can read and get some extra information about the setting, but sorry guys, I almost never read those unless they're quest critical. I know it's something of a faux pas on my part since I love games with deep lore and intriguing storylines, but those have to come naturally from the gameplay and in-game events, not as literal info dumps. Similarly, there is very little in terms of choices when it comes to the game. Sure, you can choose your class and the types of approaches you have to things, but when it comes to interacting with the world, you have either a black or white sort of choice. Very little room for ambiguity in Ember. On the other hand, the other important factors necessary for a solid game fire on all cylinders, with the soundtrack being great and the voice acting pleasantly surprising me. I know this might sound like I'm overly critical, but that's not exactly true. The game itself is very well put together. just that it didn't manage to hook me in the ways in which Original Sin or Pillars of Eternity managed to. But here's where possibly the most important differentiating factor comes in. Both Divinity Original Sin Enhanced Edition and Pillars of Eternity are priced around 40 euros each, whilst Ember is only 10 euros. So now think about all the features and comparisons I made throughout this video, the solid graphics, good music, crafting system, and the special abilities mechanic, and realize that you can have all of those for a quarter of the cost of the better known titles. Granted, they're not exactly like those found in the well-known titles, but you get the drift. As far as I'm concerned, that's not a bad deal. Not a bad deal at all, especially if you're new to the realm of computer RPGs and want a place to start. Well then, my friends, Ember is a great entry-level title for you, and I have no qualms about suggesting you buy it. And that's about it for my Ember review. Thank you for watching, and I hope you found it informative. Please like and share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe and check out the rest of my channel for many other game and movie reviews. I make videos every week, and I'm quite active on Twitter and Facebook. I've been Steven Nonsense, and you'll hear me soon.